This is our next installment in our web series, and today we have Paul Kishchuk from Vector Research. Thank you, Paul, for being here, and you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I have a business here in Whitehorse. It's been operating now for about 20 years, called Vector Research. And it does, I bill it as a research consultancy rather than management consulting. And within that business, I do business intelligence and data analytics. So I use big data tools that have evolved over the last few years on small data sets.
And what is business intelligence, more specific?
So business intelligence is all about trying to draw insights from data that a business or an organization or a government is likely already collecting. A big part of it is wrangling that data, getting it in a form that you can use the software tools to pull out those insights. But the insights are usually visualized, and it's possible to make them interactive as well as dynamic. So you can create visuals for people that they can basically ask their own questions, and they can keep feeding data into those visualizations. So as data is created, the tools have opened up the door to be able to keep adding to the data set and refreshing those visualizations so that you can keep checking in on what's happening within an organization or a business.
Okay. Huh.
What does a day look like for you? I'm sure every day is very different, but what's like an average day? What does that look like for you?
Actually, my days are often alike, and they start with a bike ride out of Riverdale along the Yukon River downtown, and then I have an espresso coffee, and then I have full work days here in my office. But I describe them as, sometimes I describe what I sell as blocks of uninterrupted time. So I feel very lucky in what I do because I'm able to dig in to research questions for extended periods of time, so hours or days. And I recognize that that's something that's not always possible to do for people, especially people in government. Lots of interruptions for me. I sort of have arranged my work around being able to focus on questions and to come up with solutions and insights. Yeah.
Great. I want to start my day with a bike ride.
I know.
I do start it with coffee, but a bike ride would be really nice.
Yeah.
Besides being on the Tech Yukon board, which is so exciting, what is the best part of your job?
I think for me, the best part is that I'm always learning. So every project is different. That makes it challenging because I'm always partway up one learning curve or another. And often I work on multiple projects at the same time, 8 to 10 on average probably. So I'm learning about a variety of different things. But for me, that's rewarding. So it's not so much about, cranking out similar types of products, like an accountant would crank out financial statements. Each problem that I'm trying to solve, each research question is a bit different. And so that's, as I say, challenging, but also rewarding and often creative.
Yeah. And you also put on a lot of workshops too, and you've done some for Tech Yukon as well. So you're spreading the knowledge as well.
Yeah.
Which is great.
What made you choose this career path?
Well, did I choose it or did it choose me?
Ooh, it chose you.
So my background is in economics. I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in economics in public finance. And really the work I do around business intelligence comes about because the tools have evolved. Lots of people were working with Excel, they're familiar with Excel. The software available now, the software I use is called Tableau. It's like, sometimes people describe it as Excel on steroids. To me, it's a different class of software because you can, as I've mentioned, do interactive visualizations and dynamic visualizations, but you're able to sort of create the data set and then work with that to see what you can find in there. So you're not limited by copying and pasting endlessly in Excel. It's possible to use data in an applied way to answer economic research questions. Yeah.
Awesome.
And do you have any recommendations for students who are looking to take a similar career path?
I would say to be a generalist. I know that analytics is seen as probably a technical field, but to be able to know or to think of good questions to ask, to pull out of the data, you need to have a generalist background, I think. I think if you're too much a technician and not enough of a generalist, it can limit what you can think of to pull out of the data. And I mean generalist in a broad sense, so not just within a particular field, but sport, music, language, all of those things, to have a very broad approach to education. That it's I think that it's a bit of a missing piece, those skills around being creative and asking creative questions. So it's okay to do all of those things, music and language and being social, hanging out with people, as well as the math. It's not just about the math and the technical part. So, yeah.
And we've actually heard this a lot, like in the interviews that we've been doing. A lot of the advice has been to be a well-rounded person, to try things, to your customer service jobs are just as important as the higher paying, like, you know what I mean? It really, it really does seem like that's a thing we forget to tell students is try things, right? Like try as many things as possible to see what you like, see what you don't like, and that experience will give you knowledge for the future.
Yeah, I think we ask students to specialize far too early these days. And within sport or within certain classes at school, and so I think it's okay to stay to have lots of different interests.
Have you had this job most of your life, or this kind of job, or like when did you start this business? And so it kind of it's cool to give students that perspective of maybe I didn't do this until later in life, or I did start earlier. What did that look like for you?
Yeah, so I mean, I've been set up consulting now for about 20 years. And my early experience was working in government, both the federal government and the Yukon government. And I've often suggested, sometimes people will come to me and ask, I've just finished school. I mean, usually it's around like, will you hire me? Do you hire people? Can I get a job? And my advice is actually to go work for a larger organization. So, work for government, work for people who you think will one day be your clients, so that you can understand how that client thinks, right? So for me, a lot of my work is for government clients, First Nation clients. So to have had that experience within government, to know, kind of the pressures within those organizations and how things flow, like the time of the year, for example, September is halfway through the government fiscal year. There's always a bump because people look at their budgets and say, oh, I haven't spent what I have to spend on my budget, so I guess I better get going on that, right? So to understand, as I say, to have been, on the inside and to know that that's really all that's going on, and that when it happens every September, you can sort of see, it helps to be able to see those patterns, right?
And maybe that leads then to the next question of, what's your best piece of advice you would give to somebody, not just a student, but to anybody who wanted to start their own business?
Yeah, so from a business perspective, I'm a big advocate of incorporating and doing that right away. And I know in a small market like Yukon, the advice is often that you need to be to a certain size before it's worth incorporating. And that's true in a strict financial or tax sense, because incorporating is a little more complicated, but it also frees you from sort of thinking small. You can think big. So an example that I use is when you incorporate, well, when you don't incorporate, when you set up as a sole proprietor, you tend to compare back to what your salary would be if you were working in an organization or when you were working in an organization. When you incorporate, you can think in terms of multiples of that salary. You're not trying to just get to where you were. You can think of how many times can I multiply that salary in the corporation, because it's something separate from you, right? So and that's what that's an example of sort of it freeing you up to think in a different way. And it's because of that separation from the person and the business that you think of the business as something different. So you can think of, hiring people or partnering with people in a different way. Because when you're a proprietor, there's no separation between you and the business, right? So it's a little more personal, but that also means you tend to think smaller. So that's a piece of advice that I've often given, is to make the leap to incorporating quickly. Yeah.
It's a good piece of advice.
Okay.
So your last question, given how technology is constantly evolving, what types of technology businesses could or would be created in the Yukon in the near future?
Okay, well, I'm going to put a bit of a COVID-19 spin on this,
Perfect.
because it's relevant. So through COVID-19, way more people have been working at home, right? Like big parts of government and businesses are sort of just woke up one morning and we're told you're working from home now, right? So we've had this massive shift, but it's been 2 or 3 months, and I think people have become comfortable with it. I've talked to people who've worked in government for like 20 years, and they're telling me they're not going back to the office. They're going to stay at home. They're going to advocate to be able to stay at home and work from home, because it's they're more productive. They're enjoying their work more. And so I think it's going to open the door for Yukon to be a home base for more people who are working remotely. Because the acceptance, there's been dabbling in people working the whole idea of telework. And some employers have experimented with that and rejected it in the end. Yahoo, I think, is an example where they went big on remote work and then shut it all down. I think we're going to see sort of that shift again, where there'll be a greater acceptance of working independently and remotely, and that the Yukon can benefit from that, because we've got such a great quality of life. We live in such a great place, and so there's potential to attract skills and new people to the community or people who are already here to be able to work in other places. And there's been some level of that happening, but I think we're going to see a big burst of growth around that.
And I know it's kind of hard to say at this time because a lot of people can't work, but do you think productivity has increased since people have been sort of working more from home?
I think it depends. I think it's quite a mix. Depending on home circumstances, right? Everything from couples with no kids. I've got a friend, but they're in a very small place and both are working from home, and they're tripping over one another. And then of course people, with kids at home, homeschooling, and some, are sort of, it's not much change for them going from the office to home. So it's hard to say around productivity, and it's true. We need to keep in mind people that are, affected by businesses closing down and sort of not having that flexibility to work from home. So,
but also kind of creates a pathway to create like better technology to work, like online technology in terms of conferencing platforms and and maybe even VR. Who knows in the future? Just so people can have a more interactive experience while working from home. I guess a lot of people are working on it. Seems so. Yeah, interesting.
I think there's a big difference too between somewhat like feeling like you don't have control over you being at home, right? Like if we all chose to be at home, then it might be a very different situation. So as slowly as people start to get used to working at home, it could become, okay, how can I take advantage of this situation and be productive and be efficient? And what technology could I use?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is true that the control piece is crucial, at home or in the office. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So if people feel in the end overall that they have more control, then I think productivity will benefit for sure.
It'll be exciting to see what happens. That's for sure.
Yes. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Paul.